panelists representing 2 continents, to this panel where we're going to discuss this question of can citizen designers create a better world? In the past, we designed for users. Today, we design with users. Tomorrow, we will have design by users, said visionary designer and educator John Frank some 2 decades ago. I increasingly take offense at the term users, but I do resonate with his perspective of a shift that he saw was very desirable, a shift from the designer, the researcher, being the expert who solves problems for people, to being the designer and researcher who is a co-creator and works with people to facilitate transformation that is collectively designed. This hasn't happened yet, even though, he said this 2 decades ago. But as the very, inspirational, I find it very inspirational, the design justice movement, as the design justice movement says, design mediates so much of our realities and has tremendous impact on our lives. Yet, very few of us participate in design processes. In particular, people who are most adversely affected by design decisions tend to have the least influence on those decisions and how they are made. Should this not change? As the recent Black Lives Matter movement or the Clicks Must Fall movement in South Africa have shown, or one of my favorites from when I was growing up in India, the Chipko movement back in the 70s. And there are so many other examples, as all of these show the power of positive change when citizens get involved is tremendous. So why should citizens not be fully involved in design, in research, more than just in the token sort of way that we do involve users in our current design processes? Will involvement of citizens in design and in research help create more local, more indigenous, more inclusive and sustainable and more equitable ways to bring about transformation in our world? Well, in the next 45 minutes or so, we will hear from our panelists, each of whom have very unique experience through their thinking and doing in this exact area of working with people in the process of transformation. So the first question I have for my panelists, and I'm going to start with Lakshmi. The question is, what would be the one most important example of an initiative, of a project, of a research program that you have worked on, where you worked with individuals, with individual citizens, with people, with communities, to create a collectively desired outcome that brought about positive transformation? So we'd love to hear about that.
Thank you. So can I request the host to put the slides on, and while that's happening,
sure.
just give you a quick introduction. I have lived in Rajasthan, South Rajasthan, for now more than 30 years, and I've only worked with rural communities. So what I share will need to be seen from that perspective. And when you work with rural communities, you need to work with the community. You can't be working in isolation. So for a designer, the work is really never totally yours. So my first very quick example is when we develop communication aids to communicate. For example, the example I've shown you here is to communicate abortion laws in India. So the way it has worked for me is that I work with the community. I gather pictures from the community, make it into make myself a picture dictionary for the area. Supposing I'm working in Alwar area, or supposing I'm working in Rajsamand or Dungarpur. So I would just make a little collection of pictures for myself and draw upon those visuals to develop my final visual of my or communication aid. And this of course has to be done in collaboration with the people you're working with, because people need to understand we need to understand how people interpret pictures. So there is so what I'll say here is that there is a visual language that is different for rural communities, and one needs to consider a visual language when developing anything. So it definitely has to be a collaborative effort. So this is one quick example of a collaboration which has worked very well, and it is also sustainable. So something that you would have designed in 2005 can be used even now. So can we have the next slide, please? So in the next slide, the next collaboration that I can speak about is a sanitary napkin that we made, again in a collaborative way, responding to changing needs within the community. And this was designed through a sustainability lens, and we developed a very simple locally, quick to easy to understand measuring tool to measure sustainability. And of course, we put the sanitary napkin through a validation using a crossover trial and a proof of concept study. And when you're working in collaboration with someone, with a rural community especially, I believe that you need to keep the work in the copyleft space so it can be, it can benefit the greater common good. So one of the key things of collaboration to my mind is, keeping your work open for people to build and, build upon. And of course, the last thing I will say here is, how to be inclusive. Try and not leave out anybody, but that is very difficult, but try to include, as many stakeholders as possible. I think my 2.5 minutes is nearly over, Apala.
Yes, indeed. And you did really well. So
we can go back to these later. So yeah.
okay, yes, definitely. So a takeaway that I'm seeing from what you said is in working with communities, the fact that not only is it that they're working with you and you're creating something that is very much local, understandable, very sustainable in that ecosystem. But another very important thing you mentioned is it can last for a very long time. It can be used for a very long time because it comes from, from there, from very much within the space instead of something that is being imposed and taken out, imposed and taken out. So I think that's an important point that I had never thought about. So thank you, and we'll come back, of course, to exploring more. So I'd like now Satyajit, you to share your thoughts.
So brief background initially is that the journey about what I'm going to talk about begins with a show called Satyamev Jayate, which was on television and a widely watched show. The reason I'm talking about the show is because the show told us that you can use communication to bring about change on a large scale. And Paani Foundation, which is the experience I'm now going to talk about in the design sense, is an institution which is born out of our experience with Satyamev Jayate. So what did the television show tell us? The television show told us that people are willing to put their time, money, and energy into actually working to transform their lives if an appropriate platform can be created for that purpose. Paani Foundation was an attempt to create that platform with the specific context of working to fight drought. The solution to drought in rural areas has been known for a very long time. The heart of it is decentralized watershed management. Because of the 2.5 minutes, I won't get into the technology. I'll say it's very low tech, very simple, very replicable, and very proven. But for some reason, this technology had not acquired scale. So the problem we were facing is we have know-how, but we have no scale. What we needed to do was to design an experience which could take that know-how to scale. So Paani Foundation set up a competition called the Satyamev Jayate Water Cup. The word Satyamev Jayate Water Cup was building on a certain equity which the show already have and gave a continuity to that effort. But the heart of what we did is that we designed an experience with and for the villager. So the participant in it is the village panchayat, and it's a competition with prizes, just as you would have prizes for a dance competition or kabaddi or cricket. But the work has to be done by the villagers themselves. So the design created 3 important pillars. Pillar 1 was the excitement and joy of a competition. Pillar 2 was training, because knowledge, we believe, is transformative. So anybody who wanted to participate had to compulsorily undergo a 4-day residential training. At least half the trainees needed to be women. So this was built into the design. And the third thing we built into the design is we said the single biggest impediment to solving the problem of drought is not rainfall, is not the engineering of structures, is not the money available for this work, but is the ability of people to come together harmoniously and cooperatively and work towards a common cause. So the design of the competition disproportionately rewarded what we call Shramadan, which is voluntary manual work. So you get a lot of marks in the competition if you do Shramadan. So this was the rough experience that we created. This is the design of the experience that we created. And in a matter of 3 years, we were able to grow this from 3 blocks to 76 blocks, covering almost all of drought hit Maharashtra. And over 6,000 villages have now participated in this competition at various points in time. And a people's movement has arisen in which people value their own ability to transform their lives. I think I must have exhausted 2.5 minutes.
It didn't feel like that. So, thank you. So, Satyajit, I'm curious though that to get to this scale of involvement of the Paani Foundation team with villagers and sort of multi-sectoral, I think, stakeholders or various entities or institutions within the rural infrastructure. To start that, what is it what helped? Because it just looks like it's two different worlds. So how did that come about?
I dare say it's an idea whose time has come, and it can be leveraged not just for water, it can be leveraged by anyone, anywhere in India. Because the heart of the idea is that people have to solve the problems themselves. I think this is something which people have long since realized, that we cannot wait for government, we cannot wait for corporates or CSR or whatever. All these people will play a positive role. They have a very, very critical role to play. But unless the people are involved themselves, our problems are not going to go away. So I think first we were building on that. The second thing that we were building on is that it looked like something which would work. I think it's very important that anything which we want to scale up among the people, it has to be highly demonstrative in the sense that you actually see that by doing X, I will get Y result. This should be visible in a finite period of time. And 3 is people should deeply perceive that there is no other agenda. This is the only agenda. I think if that happens, then you get all the stakeholders to come together. And we are very, very blessed in the sense that from every government at every level, from the village panchayat to the central government, state government, corporates, all the local MLAs, MPs belonging to different political parties, everybody has come together for this. So I think there is some pop in this idea, in the concept. So I don't think it is anything unique that we have done. I think it's an idea which is waiting to be replicated on scale.
Okay, thank you. And we'll explore that again, of course. So over to you, Nomonde, now to share your thoughts.
You know, when you pose this question in particular, we deeply believe in the power of empathy and in the active participation of the people that we design for, actually unlocking what is valuable for citizens from a product and a service perspective. So for that reason, we do tend to gravitate towards brands, projects, and mandates that have this as a focal point. Someone mentioned earlier that the agenda was important. When citizens have reason to believe that you have an agenda that is not aligned to fulfilling their needs, you will struggle to get a product or a service that is in tune with those needs. And so we worked with a regional state-owned bank in South Africa. We traveled quite extensively conducting on-the-ground research, connecting, understanding, and engaging with citizens in the townships, the rural outskirts of the province. The mandate from the client was also very clear. It was to find out what kind of bank the citizens that they serve wanted, so that they can be in line with that. You'll notice that I use the word citizen. This was particularly profound in our experience because we have not yet come across a bank that is a state-owned entity and that also has a genuine desire to understand its customer base, as well as the willingness to redesign themselves in their DNA entirely around what the citizens want them to be. So every interaction we had was transformational, not only for us, but for them as well. These humans with dreams, with wishes, with desires and aspirations, that they were so abundantly clear how a bank might go around helping them to achieve, actually redesigned the bank themselves. So we then realized the need to localize even global institutions, right, to the level of the needs of the people where they exist as physical entities. What we did in the method was that we basically just used the agency of these humans to want to change their current circumstances, because the people we were working with and interacting with were, in fact, what we categorize as disenfranchised, previously disadvantaged, and marginalized. They were sitting in the rural outskirts of KZN, where people don't go, where products don't go, where services don't go. We also relied on their ecosystem and incorporated that into our activities. So, for example, we went to the traditional leaders and engaged in the co-creation process with them as well, because no one knows better than the traditional leaders what the vision of the people is and how to grow the economy of that local community as well. So what was different about how we went about doing this was that we became participant observers. We learned and learned and learned again and relied on the citizens themselves to tell us what they wanted. We didn't go to the ground with any preconceived notions. We arrived with nothing but empathy. We had no concepts even. We just had a willingness to learn from the citizens. We help them to help us to create this entity that they so desperately need. We didn't walk away from the engagement of design of apps and websites. They didn't want that. They told us they did not need that. They wanted a bank that can talk to them like the human beings that are, and a bank that doesn't start talking to them once they start making money, but a bank that has an invested interest in helping them to make this money, and a bank that is culturally relevant to them. The beauty of this was also the service themselves and the products themselves through the methods that enable them to tell their story in a way that brings to the fore their own lived experiences. And most importantly, the citizens that told us that this design experience that they had just been through had given them hope for a better future, had given them an understanding that they actually can control their destiny to some extent. And that's it.
Okay, that was fascinating. And considering, I have also worked so much in South Africa and also with you, but to see this shift in how you are looking at banking, which seems like there's just one way that banks can work. There is no other alternative ways. But to look at that, there could be. Let that emerge. Let that emerge from the people for whom the bank is supposed to, be in existence for. So I think that was very interesting. Nomonde, one thing that I really wonder is that, do you feel that when you work in these kinds of projects and you're there, you're also part of the ecosystem, you are part of the culture. Is it different when somebody from the outside comes and is part of designing a solution, however good the intent may be, however much my heart is in the right place and I want to do the right thing, but do you see a challenge? And I know that's a tricky question, but still.
Absolutely. So I got to see and understand and experience with my own kind of perceptions as well that I had walking into that process, that my existence, my outward appearance, my accent, the way I speak, the way I greet, influences the quality of the insights that, or the quality of the information that I can get out of the people themselves. I had to learn, Apala, I had to learn how to greet people in a particular community, how to engage with men who were my father's age in a way that made them feel that they could be disarmed enough to talk to me about the inner workings of their minds and to talk to me about the inner workings of their households. Um, if you think about it, had I brought someone else in, maybe someone who speaks a different language, maybe someone even of a different race, as sensitive a topic as that may be, they would have introduced a barrier in the interaction and in the way that the citizens were interacting with them. Now, when people hear me speak, they're accustomed to, and I don't speak English when I interview citizens. I speak the language they speak as their home language. And if their home language is not a language I speak, someone else needs to be doing that work, not me. Relationship and a mechanism and a sense of relatedness between you and the person that you're speaking to, and their perception, your ability to understand their circumstance, and their perception of your ability to empathize with their circumstance goes to other levels, because suddenly they're speaking to someone like them, someone who looks like them, someone who sounds like them, someone who appears to be complying with the cultural norms of the area that they find themselves in. So yes, absolutely, it does make a big difference.
Okay. Sort of this whole way of looking at decolonializing design, it just makes me very conflicted myself, because I felt for such a long time that, when I work in South Africa, when I work in the townships, I feel so much part of the ecosystem. But I'm getting, these methods and processes from somewhere else. And who am I to get that there? But at the same time, I really miss that. I really miss not being this. It's a big conflict. And I think it needs to be dealt with. But I don't know how, but I'm so glad that you're making that very specific as a condition. So
localize it, right? That also influences how people perceive you. So maybe it's not, your version of cultural probes is different. Maybe it's sitting around the fire.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. We may have. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So now I'm going to move to Naveen. Naveen, your thoughts, please.
Right. So, yeah, I think I don't have one project, so to speak, but I will talk about my work with Maya Health starting 2016 onwards. So Maya Health is an organization that that trains women to become community health workers, but also with the perspective that they earn a living and a livelihood by serving the communities, with helping the community in preventive health and management of chronic diseases and nutrition and aspects like that. And I've been involved with them since then, even as a way to explore how design can be part of their practice broadly. So we started off with a project of teaching participatory design. Wait a minute, I need to be ready for the stage, apparently.
That's very cute.
Yeah. So, you want to say hi? No, so backstage. Okay, so I started with the project of enabling them to see if they can include design methods in their way of working, and it has moved on to a lot of work where participation has taken on a quite a different meaning. So when you asked about an example of a product or an outcome that led through participation, what has emerged is that it is a participation into a relationship building, into a practice building than a project. So we have worked together. So there's multiple SHGs of health workers, as along with Maya Health, which is a different organization that supports them, and me, and sometimes my students do come in, and it has moved into a practice of supporting each other. So I've worked with them to explore an idea on collaborative diet formulation. Students have worked with them to explore preventive care services with them in participation with them. And also I've been working with them to help them articulate their future vision and strategies in the coming years. And in return, what has happened is they have opened up their communities and their own participation in enabling me to get, let's say, a grant and try to explore pregnancy care and implications for technology design in those communities. And then I'll take on the example of this pregnancy care research project as a way to say that it was a participatory research activity where we involved the health workers because they had a stake in it initially to see if they could plug in any roles that they could play in the community to offer pregnancy care services. But through the project, when they also were involved in the research and the synthesis, what emerged is they don't see a role in offering the pregnancy care service. ASHA workers and the Anganwadi workers are doing a really good job there. So then the project then took on a different route. I mean, that was an act of refusal, so to speak. So yeah, so my summary is that my work with Maya Health has evolved into what I would say as broadly define it as a participatory action research design thing, which is a kind of a practice, which is very similar to what Lakshmi Murthy's practice is in many ways, right? Inspirational. I've been working with her too in a couple of things. I will not talk about it in this section, but so it evolves over time. The relationship evolves over time, and participation is figured every time. Who and what they participate in.
Yeah. Okay. So this bit about not going in with, okay, this is the beginning, this is the end, and this is going to be the journey. But, as participatory action research sort of teams, it's collectively decided. Sometimes you have to take a totally different route. Sometimes it's not even what you really maybe want or what you think is the right thing, but it has to be configured in different ways as you go along.
Yes, exactly.
A question I have of you is, how do students react to this? Do students find it difficult to navigate, something that starts, but it's not really known which direction it'll go towards, or are they okay?
So I mean, in many ways, what happens is by the time it comes to the students, the project is more or less well defined. Right? They worked on a summer internship for an IEC material to be developed with. So the background work is a bit invisible to them, which is unfortunate, so to speak. But they've had students who are working on theses and now who have been now working as a freelance consultant with Maya right now. There's one student who worked on a capstone with them and with me on the pregnancy care project, and now working to see if we can help them, get their strategy and roadmap in place and facilitate their interactions with other stakeholders. So, and that is going conversations, right? There's a lot of work that gets done through conversations, and that is quite uncomfortable if you're a designer who likes to do stuff. So there's a conflict there. Yeah.
Yes, majorly. Yes. Okay. But I think I feel a lot of hope in having students be part of the intricacies of this sort of change. Naveen, we can't hear you.
Okay. No, I said yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Actively making students involved is something actually that I am and her organization, which are these adolescents, and then the design students who are coming from urban areas, and then we do these workshops. It's stopped due to COVID now, but hopefully we'll revive them. where it's about just 5 days, but 5 days of learning together through design and about our own bodies. But the kind of complexities that the students get exposed to about what design could do in this alternative spaces is quite immense and quite humbling to
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So, and now we go to Girish as the last but not the least panelist. For you.
It is interesting to hear to all of you, and most of my experience has been in corporate world. And surprisingly enough, even though the corporate world is very siloed, sectioned, market segmentations, and so on, I was fortunate enough to work on a couple of projects. And partly it was because I was on the research side and new product development side. So one project that was near and dear to me, which had a resemblance of citizen designers approach, was Classmate PC. And the research for this was done across multiple countries. The team was, this was at Intel. And a few things that we did, which was not just pure going and asking for what users want. There was a lot of interaction with not only an individual user, but the ecosystem, the teachers, the students. And it was interestingly, when it started, from the management, we had a clear agenda that this has to be designed for people of certain socioeconomic class, because Intel was interested in selling certain kind of technology. However, the design and research community, we kind of looked at all the different type of schools, including government schools in India, which did not even have benches. And examples where the teacher had said, I don't have benches, I'm not going to fret and try to get benches. And there is one example in Chennai where they threw all the benches out and used a completely different way of teaching. And those kind of interactions with people helped us to understand, even though we are designing for a particular segment, how should technology be developed so that it can go across. The second thing that happened is, as the product got developed, which was basically a very robust laptop, we did a lot of in school and in learning environment type of tests, studies, which were not purely usability tests. There were longitudinal studies. Many of them went for 6 months, a year, where students were using it, teachers were using it. And that participation actually made the second version much more better. And so that's how it worked in the corporate world. Even though the segment was specific, suggested by the management, being the design group, which was interested in these kind of methodologies, we did look at it. And to just talk about what Nomonde said about, like, as a researcher, when you go into a different country or different, we had that experience not only within the country. If I went to a rural area, it was so different, but we had colleagues from all the different parts of the world, UK and US. And one of the things that worked for us is this methodology that Apala had created, called A Stranger in a Strange Land, where teamwork between a local and a non-local helped us to understand the citizens' perspective and work with them in a very collaborative way, much more powerful.
Okay. So the combination of the inside and outside, the academic views.
Exactly. Yeah.
Girish, one thing though, in this, you talked about how you use different research paradigms, perhaps even within a slightly constrained environment, corporate sort of environment for Classmate PC. In doing a long time sort of spent on researching a particular product, how did you make that shift of the participants still like being like, I'm the test subject, and here is, I have to say all this, and what happens is not something I have control or I know. Was there anything that you could experiment, you were able to experiment with to shift that?
Yeah, so the initial part of the research didn't have that, right? Because even though there was participatory, and then, for example, if we went into a village, there was never a one-on-one interviews, right? It was the whole village participating in what we wanted to do. But even then, it was still understanding user needs and then working with them collaboratively to figure out what we are designing. However, more amount of participation happened when the first version of product was developed. And then we did longitudinal studies in almost about 120 countries. And these products were given in live setting for almost 6 months duration. And there were multiple times when none of us from Intel were there, and teachers and students and in certain ecosystems, it was the tuition teacher and the parents were using this. And that allowed us to get that feeling of like, I could see that transition from students and teachers being, I will tell you what to design, to actually designing it. And then we would go there after 10 days or 2 weeks to figure out what's going on. And you would see designs being done by students, designs being done by teachers, which was very fulfilling. And that kind of then opened us to say that what needs to go into the second version.
Okay. Very interesting. Okay. So now I know that we've talked quite a bit, and I find it fascinating. I don't know how to not talk more about this, but let's move to the next question, which is, I will pose the question to Nomonde first. How did you, when you were working, on this banking project, how did you enable shifting this paradigm of you being the expert who's there creating the solution, even though, you are using methods of being the insider and you're an insider, but further on, greeting them in a certain way, sitting around the fire, talking, all of that. But still, how did you shift that perception of you are the expert, you are creating the solution for the people, from that to going towards, no, you're one of them. It's an equal partnership. Because those divisions that exist of power and hierarchies and all of that, those are what inhibit many people in expressing their views, because there are others in their ecosystem, in a rural ecosystem, in a village ecosystem, who are more powerful than them. And therefore, some people will not speak. And then everybody will look at you as the expert who decides and who, takes away whatever information you got from the ones who did speak. So how did you shift these paradigms?
There was never immediately launched into research activity with any one person or any one citizen's unit or environment. We had to initially go through a process of disarming the citizen, helping the citizen to understand that actually we are here to learn from you. You are the expert. You are the master of this thing that we're trying to do together, you and I. Right? And I suppose this you speak about is a pitfall of the experience design community, because it's so niche. If I think of how we operate normally in the corporate context, in the continent, in the country, we tend to want people to come to us and people to meet us in a space that is comfortable to us. But when you go and you meet the citizen in their place where they may or may not feel being there, and you experience what it's like as they experience what it's like to feel that your safety is compromised, to be able to unpack issues of gender roles within the context of the product or the service that you are trying to design or co-create with them. It's in the citizen coming to a realization are as vulnerable as they are. So the paradigm is to be vulnerable. It's not to be neutral. It's to understand that when someone breaks down into tears, telling you their story, that they're expecting you to empathize. They're not expecting you to be neutral and go, I see. They're expecting to see emotion on your face too, because you're a human being learning from another human being. So it does take some vulnerability on your part as the researcher, as the designer. You need to give in
I think we.
Sorry, did someone speak?
Okay. So, Nomonde, important thing which I think emerged from here, interesting concept of neutrality, which we've been taught a lot in terms of design and in research, particularly, that we've got to be neutral. That's the skill. But it really is quite the opposite in what you're saying, in being able to shift this paradigm, in being able to really be part of that ecosystem. You've got it's a human interaction. It's not a human researcher, it's not the citizen and the researcher. It's a citizen and a citizen who's having a conversation. And that's perhaps a very important shift from the way we construct our research experiments and look at how we embed neutrality in everything we do. So, okay, cool. Now, I'll throw this question open to Naveen next.
Right. So for me, I think the first time that I met the health navigators, and then I explained the idea of what we're going to do with them for the next 14 weeks. The question that I got asked back is, what's in it for you? Why are you doing this? And I keep going back to that question because that keeps me in check in terms about what is this, because easily we tend to get into this savior complex that that is fostered even in design schools, and then it becomes even more stronger when we go out of the design schools. That A, design can save the world, and B, that designers can save the world. And designers will lead through design to save this world. But I feel that, and my work with healthcare workers have taught me that they don't need saving. In fact, they're much more adept at. I mean, in the sense that yes, I mean, there's a role that design needs to play for sure. I'm not discounting that role. But that role has to be that worked out through negotiations and dealing with frictions that comes that you necessarily come when you're working with people on the ground. And for me, then what has been is honesty. So the way that I responded to that question is I told them that, look, I my only stake here is that I'm an academic, and my students get to learn about how to do this, and B, I may end up writing about this and getting a publication in my name. So and that honesty has helped me, I guess. And for personally speaking, because it's about trying to figure out what are they getting out of it by giving their time, their money, as well as because for them a lot of time is money, right? And also the challenge becomes when they become emotionally invested, right? And then you cannot say the project funding ran out, because that's it, let's move on. So these are all the questions that we need to really think through and work with when we have to we need to work when we talk about designing with people, designing with communities, and not for, because designing for is well defined, well framed, right? There's a product out there that you design, then your responsibility is done and over with, unless there's a lawsuit against you, which in India rarely happens. But with design that you're working with communities over time, then that responsibility is different. You're not responsible for the product, but what you're responsible is for the relationships that you build. So that and part of it is that honesty, and part of it is as I agree with Nomonde, that's also part of it. Partly is about being vulnerable and allowing that space for others to be vulnerable, so that we work with those things, we work with those concerns over time.
Okay. Yeah. So, that's a very sort of interesting insight that you speak about, that this designer as savior syndrome completely, that I think that's one of the challenges we face. But this insight about the relationship that you build when you're designing with people, you have to be so cognizant that that's one of the things that doesn't exist in the designing for people. It's a huge shift. And, for me, it was just a small aha moment for me now that's key. The moment you think of it as the relationship, there's so many things that change. so many things that come from how you create and manage relationships otherwise. Why should this be different? So honesty, vulnerability, all of those things come into play. So, okay, very interesting. Okay, so I will now move to Satyajit, if you could share your views.
Would you just repeat the question now in the context?
Yeah, sure. So it is that how did you enable shifting this paradigm of Paani Foundation team being the expert? You're creating the solution.
Okay.
You've talked a little bit about that, of course, in the previous answer, but
yeah, actually, it was quite simple because in any case, we have no real experience of watershed management. In fact, I used to go to the villages. I remember in year one, in which I used to say, number one, I'm not a farmer. Number two, I'm not an expert in water. I don't even have a village to speak of. We are communicators, but we have paid careful attention to what several among you have already done. So all that we did was to build on the existing expertise of certain villages. So in Maharashtra, there are two very famous villages. One you will certainly have heard of, which is Anna Hazare's village of Ralegan Siddhi. And the other is Popatrao Pawar's village of Hivre Bazar. Now these are drawing on the existing traditions of this country at every level, at the level of technology and at the level of social organization. So so the design at no point in time can be claimed to have invented anything.
Okay. So drawing upon, local indigenous wisdom of how things have been done, sorted, conflicts that arose, how those have been, dealt with, all of that is what helped, the foundation and its team work together with the communities. And perhaps therein lies the answer of the hierarchies, which I thought was fascinating, that in any any part of India, but rural areas particularly, there are so many divides that come to the fore for very many different reasons, so that everybody worked together in spite of all of that. That in itself is fascinating, but this is where perhaps the answer lies, because you all went and looked at everybody's way of solving problems and getting them together.
Right.
Cool. Okay. Girish?
Yeah, and it's interesting. In a corporate world, it works slightly differently, right? Because eventually the corporate looks at how do I design something and then make money out of it. However, the way we did it when we did our research as well as design, and I would say, it's more of a collaborative effort. Where going in, the designer and researcher, ethnographers, or whoever was going in, we would say, we are apprentices. We don't know anything about this. Intel and HP, which is a joint project, they are technologies, and they are going to build something based on their own knowledge. And what we need to be doing is we need to be working together and understand how this system can be designed better. And that approach actually made them start realizing that they need to tell us, they need to be working with us. And then using the typical design research methods, it worked, right? But then the most impact happened when the longitudinal studies started, because that is when they started realizing that it is not just we are coming together and taking input and going back. One of the things that I always have pondered, and this was a question that was asked of me when I presented CMPC work at a conference, open source conference, and the question was asked is, okay, you go and do this research and you pay them, and then you get all these ideas and you build those ideas and you take billions of dollars out of it, right? So how is it fair? And that is when I started realizing this capitalistic world has created us into creating things benefiting one but not benefiting the other. We do feel that we want to design something for others, but there is that agenda, as Naveen said. People do question, right? What is your agenda? And we can say from a research and I'm just trying to understand, but you are trying to understand to create products. And if that goes away and you say, okay, I want to make an impact on this society, then technology doesn't mean that it is just an ICT technology. It could be paper or whatever is convenient, right, for this. And that I felt was difficult to do in a corporate world.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. In a corporate world, because of all the underlying agendas, etc. That's part of the structure. It's difficult to move away, right, from that paradigm altogether. Okay, I'm being warned about time, so I'm going to go to Lakshmi straight away with this question. And the last question, I may just throw it open to everybody because we may have to end without doing the last question. But Lakshmi, I want to give you time for this very important question.
See, to use the word agenda, which Girish just said, see, there is, it would be untruthful to say that there is no agenda. Yes, we all have an agenda. So in the first example that I showed you, the agenda was communicating safe abortion practices, right? So, so in that case, was it truly participatory? No, because abortion laws had to be communicated to a community. Where did it become participatory? It became participatory because we needed to consult mothers of young teenagers, we needed to consult parents, and we needed to understand what is the best way to communicate to young adolescents that don't reach a stage where you're forced to go to a service provider who doesn't give you the correct the treatment, the correct termination of pregnancy in the correct way. So when in that sense there is a collaboration. So in the first example, the collaboration was, how do we communicate that? So we did that through storytelling. So the little slide I showed you was just one part of the communication aid. So when do you need to go? When is the right time to go for an abortion? Those were communicated through stories that happened from the field. So that is the agenda we had. In the second example that I showed you, there was really no agenda. We just the need for a contemporary, trendy sanitary napkin came about from discussions, and it gradually and organically grew into the project that we have today. So it really depends. So, but the bottom line is working with the community, because that is where your work lies, and that is where it's working for the greater common good. So you have to work with the people, otherwise it just becomes then what is the difference between a designer working with communities and an artist? So
well said.
I will just leave that open now.
Okay. I'm curious though, and even though there's a time check, I'm curious, Lakshmi, how did you manage to get past the issues which I would think would happen, where women would find it difficult to voice or express themselves? Is it the storytelling? Is it, how did you, when there are men or elders, whoever is more powerful, the women don't speak in front of them, if that is what you experienced?
It's time. It's how much time you spend, and how many it's multiple visits. It's not one visit. It's multiple visits, hanging around in the field, just being there, participating in some function, just being one with the community. And that it becomes easier for NGOs who've spent a long time in the field. So, for example, now if I have to introduce something new, or or whatever it is that I want to do now, I can just go, because we've invested so many years. But in the initial years, it was spending a lot of time, and it is, you can't design anything in the four walls. You have to take your drawing board to the field, and the field is of course your teacher. And of course, to young design students, I always say that be ready to hear that what you've designed is not working, which is what happened to me when I started working in '86 as a young designer. Nothing that I would design would be appropriate for the community. And that's when I understood that, okay, even a simple drawing is not followed. So what is it that I need to be drawing? So these things, I think, just come. It comes organically, and only time does this, I think. Time and trust. Everyone spoke about relationships, so I won't say that again. But yeah, time and trust. The two T's will work really well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I wanted to go on. I had another question, but I'm going to just say that question is open for the audience, and it's for everybody to reflect upon, and of course the panelists also, but we won't be able to get that answer right here. And the question was, do we all feel that maybe there is a need to make citizens aware of what design and research can do, so that citizens can hold all of us more accountable for what we do if there is more awareness? But that question we will park for another day, but I hope it leads to more conversations beyond the confines of a conference space. And what I feel, there are some questions for the audience, but again, they're mainly for Paani Foundation. So perhaps we shall send the questions to you. It is about how you incentivize political leadership to come together, etc. But I think I'm being told that we not stay live. I don't mean my life, but we are not going to be live on the conference for after 2 minutes. So I'm going to just have to wrap up. So I really think that, from what every one of you said about the shift to working with communities, I think the core of it is humility as a designer, and the relationship, to think of it as a relationship of long standing. And if you invest in that with friends, you have to invest all of those attributes in building a relationship with a community that you're going to be part of, and you have to experience the outcome yourself. So I think we designers and researchers, we just need to stop, seeing ourselves as these obsessive solutioners of our truth, and instead start seeing ourselves as detached seekers of many truths. And maybe that'll help in shifting the paradigm. So, and I just can't stop myself from ending with this last quote, which I actually found on the Design Beku site. It's by Toni Morrison, Nobel laureate Toni Morrison, who says, when you get these jobs that you've been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is, if you are free, you need to free somebody else. And that, to me, it really resonated as the core of all of this conversation. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being, for accommodating the time challenges. And thank you for being wonderful panelists. A lot of insights. Over to you.
Thanks, Apala.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye.